To start out, we're going to do a whipped back stitch around the whole edge of the egg. As you can see, I did the back stitch already on the left side. You come up through the fabric, make one stitch, and then skip a stitch length and go back down into the previous hole. So you go forward and then back into the previous. And we're going to skip that little inside of the flower there. But to do the whipped part, you bring up your needle right next to the starting hole here. And then you're just going to slide your needle with a thread through the loops. Make sure you go the same direction every time. And this is whipping the back stitch. And it creates this nice smooth line that covers over all of the edges. This is a fishbone leaf. You're going to start at the tip of the leaf and make a stitch down into the center. Then come up along the line and you're going to cross over with your next stitch. One stitch here that crosses from the right to the left. And then the same on the other side. And you're going to alternate like this until you get to the bottom of the leaf. It crisscrosses and creates this really nice pattern on the leaf. For the vine and the leaves, we're going to do a combination of a stem stitch and the fishbone. So I started on the outside of the line here. You make a stitch, and right before you pull it through, you're going to bring your needle up inside that loop. You can see I started on the outside of the eggshell here because this would continue around the egg if it was 3D. Then come down about a stitch length and leave another loop. Bring your needle up inside the middle of that and pull it taut. Each time you're going to come up in the middle, make sure each time you come up on the same side of the thread. So I'm coming above the top of the thread every time, the top of the loop. And you're going to continue that across and tie it, then go down through the outside of the loop and tie it in the back. And then all of our leaves then will be that fishbone pattern again, all the way to the end. This next stitch may seem like one of the more challenging ones. You're going to use all 6 strands, come up through the fabric on the outside, and instead of going down through the fabric, we're actually going to snag a tiny piece of it. So you're going down and up with the tip of your needle so that it's stuck in the fabric there. Then take your opposite hand and take the thread around the opposite side of the needle and hold it there while you pull the needle through, and all the extra thread, keep it tight until you get to the very end, and then it's going to create this little knot. Now working down, you're going to point your needle down. We're going to snag a little bit of the fabric again. I push my finger on the back of the fabric to raise it up a little so that I can manipulate the needle. Go around the outside of the needle. Hold it there with your thumb while you pull the needle through with your other hand and all the extra thread, and then let go at the end, and there's your little knot. It's a nice way to secure a zigzag stitch. And one more here. Be careful of those other stitches around it. Go around the outside, opposite side from where you were coming from. Hold it tight until the end. This next one is a woven running stitch. And so we're going to do a running stitch the whole way across here with the little dashes in our darker thread. You can use all 6 strands. And you just come up at the beginning of the line and go down at the end of the line. We're going to do that the whole way across. Now take your 6 strands of another color. We're going to start on the outside of the egg this time. and we're just looping it through our running stitch. So you're working on top of the fabric, we're not going down through, you're just sliding it under each stitch. Don't pull it tight, you're gonna leave a little bit of a loop there, and you just kind of pat it down and it will stay. Then go up through the next one, leave a little loop, you can untwist it if needed, just pat it down. And I just have that kind of hilly pattern as just kind of a guide of how long you want your hoops to be. So you're going to cover that up as you go across. And then end it by going down outside the opposite side of the egg. And then you can even it out here and there if needed. Just give it a little tug. Here I'm using all 6 strands to do some French knots. You're going to come up through the fabric, take your needle around the thread while you hold it tight with your opposite hand, and then insert it back down into that circle. It can be in the previous stitch or right next to it. Hold it tight still with your left hand and gradually release it as you pull it back down through the fabric. So keep holding it with that opposite hand, pull your needle down through and gradually release it. Now your pattern is going to look a little bit different than mine right here. You should have a series of 3 horizontal lines next, not these up and down lines here that are under mine. I changed it a little bit once I started recording these videos because I wanted to use that stitch elsewhere. So you're going to do 3 lines of whipped backstitch. So here I'm doing my backstitch across. Make sure to start on the outside of your egg and end on the outside of your egg. You're going to do one color, maybe your lighter color for the backstitch, and then your darker color for the whipped part. And I'm doing like the purple here, and then I would do pink next, and then the bluish purple. So you'll have 3 rows of your whipped backstitch. Now here's where your pattern is going to look a little different from mine. I didn't do lines like this in my final draft. This is going to be the row of dots right above your lazy daisy and your woven wheel, right near the middle. You're going to have groups of 3s that we're working in. And in the end, it will be those X shapes. But for now, you have 2 rows of dots. Come up through the top, go down through the bottom dot, and you just need to make sure when you're done that you have enough lines that you have groups of 3. Now in your next color, you're going to come up, we're going to do this in groups of 3s. So you're going to come up in the middle to the left side of the middle strand in a group of 3, and very carefully you're going to slide it under the left stitch in that group of 3, and then you're going to go under the right side and back to the middle and back down through the fabric right under that middle stitch. I'm using 3 strands here, and I use 3 strands for the lines. You're going to pull it, and it's going to gather those. Here we're going to do a chain stitch. You're going to start on the outside of your fabric, come up with your needle, and then back down right next to it. I'm using 6 strands here. Go over that edge of the egg and come up through the little loop that you've made. And then you're going to take your needle back down inside that previous loop once you've pulled it tight, and you're going to create another loop. Don't pull it all the way. Leave some room and make sure it's straightened out. Come up with your needle inside the loop, pull it taut until you have a nice little loop, and then you go down again, and this is going to create a series of chains. When you've gotten to the end, don't go down inside the previous loop, go outside the loop to finish it off. I'm using 3 strands here, starting outside the loop and coming down to the middle of this V. Then I'm going to come up on the top part of the V, cross over to the other side and go down, and this is going to create a little bit of a loop. Don't pull it tight, leave a loop there, and pull your needle up through the inside of that V, and then pull it tight, and it will create a perfect V shape. Now we're going to turn the V into a Y and go down into the next V. So we've now made more of a Y shape, and this makes the attached flyleaf. You're going to continue to come up at the top of the V, down through the next side of the V, and then up through the middle, down in the next V, and the whole way across. That will create this little vine. I'm using 3 strands for the Lazy Daisy stitch. You come up through the center, back down through the center, and leave a little loop. Come up at the top of that petal, pull it, and then do your stitch outside the loop this time. And that will secure the loop for the Lazy Daisy. And you're going to continue that the whole way around. For the woven wheel, you're taking all 6 strands and you're just doing a stitch on each of these 5 spokes. So I go up through the bottom, come down through the middle. Now you're going to take a long piece of thread, all 6 strands, loop it through the needle, and tie the ends together so it would make 12 strands total. Bring your needle up next to one of the spokes, beside it. We're going to go over the first spoke and then slide the needle under the second spoke. We're going to work around the circle. Every other spoke we're going to go over, under. So this one we go under. Be careful sliding it through. Pull it as tight as you can. We're going to go over, then under. And you're going to alternate the whole way around the circle like that. Over, under, pulling it tight. And it does get a little tight near the end, but you want it to be as full as possible. It gets tricky to see those spokes after a while, but just slide your needle carefully under and you should be able to find them. And then when you can go no further, you're going to take your needle back down through the fabric and tie it off in the back. Do a French knot in the middle of the Lazy Daisies. So bring it up through, go around your needle 2 times, insert it back down through and hold it tight, releasing it slowly to create the knot. We're going to use all 6 strands for this brick stitch. You're going to go a stitch length, and then you're going to go forward and do a back stitch. And you're going to work the whole way across this row, just doing a series of stitches, just using that back stitch the whole way across. We're going to continue to do a whole row of back stitch again to fill this in, but you want your stitches to alternate with the seams of the previous line. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. So I'm going to go under the previous line. I'm going to come up just under the middle of their stitch and then do my back stitch. And it's going to create a brick pattern of alternating where the seams are. So I did a little section here so you can see how it alternates, and it's just using a back stitch the whole time. The Ermine Star I like to keep somewhat delicate, so I only use 3 strands, and you're just making 3 stitches that crisscross across these lines. For the couching, we're going to thread our needle with all 6 strands, come up on the outside of the egg, come across the arch, and just set your needle into the fabric for a minute. Now taking your second needle and your second color, come up at the beginning of that, and you're going to make a little stitch just around that loose thread. And it's going to tack it in place. This is called couching. So your thread is just laying across that arch, and you're just making a series of little stitches over and under, over, under, around this to secure it in place. As you go, pull your darker thread, just give it a little tug so it's not getting wrapped up and it's staying flat. And then you'll pull the needle out at the end of your dark fabric, go down outside the egg, and tie it off in the back. For the last stitch, we're going to do a satin stitch, and I only use 3 strands for this. I come up at the highest point of the petal and then down at the base, and then I go up next to it and down. Now with a petal that is tapered at the bottom where it gets smaller at the bottom, sometimes I don't go all the way down to the bottom. I'll do some shorter stitches, and then the next one I'll go all the way down to the bottom so that I can kind of curve it in. This way the stitches don't get too bunched up at the bottom, and it fills it out nicely. And then for the center of the flower, you're going to do 1 stitch straight across the bottom where we left a gap from our whipped back stitch. And then we're going to layer our stitches above that. A satin stitch again, 3 strands, just filling in the last part of that flower. Just long stitches across. They get smaller as you get towards the edge of the center. And we're all done.